Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors and visitors. I hope you're all ready for this very short meeting, hopefully. Not like the planning committee on Tuesday. It went on until about 10 o'clock, I believe. Well, very welcome to attend this meeting tonight, especially our visitors from, I think mainly from Ashbourne, who are going to speak later. But just a word of warning, this meeting is being filmed for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's website. So if anyone present or members of the public do not wish to have their image captured, they should make themselves known to Democratic Services immediately. First of all, before we go on, can I just introduce, I'm Councillor Martin Burfoot, I'm chair of this committee. Can I introduce Councillor Peter O'Brien on my right, who's my vice chair, and to James McLaughlin, Director of Corporate and Customer Services on my left, who's given me a lot of advice before this meeting about procedures and so on. So I'm very grateful to James. If we can move on then. Item 1 on the agenda is to receive the apologies of any member who's unable to attend today's meeting. Tommy, if you can report on apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've got
Tommy
apologies from Councillor Nash and Councillor Slack.
And Councillor Ripton is attending as a substitute for Councillor Slack. Item 2 on the agenda is to receive the record of proceedings of the committee meeting held on the 8th of June. So we're asked to, or you're asked to approve their accuracy. Has anyone got any questions or challenges to those minutes?
I move approval, Chair.
Right. Second, Councillor Wayne. Right. Thank you. We need to obviously vote on that, yeah. So all in favour? Very good. Thank you. Nobody against? Abstentions? No? Right. Okay. Apart from those who weren't there. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Thank you for that. Item 3 is to receive statements from members of the public. So there are 3 speakers tonight, all on agenda item 13, which I'm bringing forward to the next item on the agenda, rather than keeping you waiting for 1 hour, 2 hours, heaven knows how long. But I think you prefer to speak now and listen to the debate now, rather than wait for that length of time. So if the first speaker, that's Nicholas Bishop, would like to go to the desk, and then I'll tell you, or one of my colleagues will tell you when your time starts, your 3 minutes. You'll be reminded after 2.5 minutes that you've got 30 seconds to go.
Am I on now? Yeah, I think I'm on.
Okay.
Yeah, my name's Nick Bishop. I am a resident of Buxton Road in Ashbourne, chair of the Buxton Road Residents Group. So by the time this committee meets in September to endorse the Air Quality Action Plan, it will be approximately 2.5 years since May 2021, when the AQMA was declared. 2.5 years. Despite the acknowledged threat to public health posed by HGVs, the town is still besieged by HGVs. They continue, unhindered and without interruption, to aggravate the town. In response to public concern, there have been 4 public meetings, a half a dozen progress reports to this committee, a digital survey, individual interviews, and that's not to mention the bombastic interference from Councillor Spencer. Notable by their absence in the public discourse have been representatives from the mineral extraction and haulage companies. These absent stakeholders are the authors of our misfortune. It's difficult to avoid the conclusion that the County Council, aided and abetted by the District Council's previous political leadership, privileges the interests of mineral extractors and hauliers over the health, safety and well-being of Ashbourne residents. That's corporate capture. My question is, when and how will either council, district and county, hold the mineral and haulage companies accountable for the hazards to public health that their businesses pose to Ashbourne residents? Finally, I want to suggest that there should be established a working group to monitor and evaluate the impact of measures in the AQAP. A membership of such a group should have the requisite technical expertise and include residents who are intended to benefit from such measures. I'd like to thank established and newly elected councillors for their support on this issue. Thank you.
Switch on. The next speaker is Ms. Conti, another local resident.
Hello, my name is Dardia Conti. I also live on Buxton Road and I'm a member of the residents group there. I have got a question. I wanted to know if the committee could please review the existing plans, associated data and the consultant's report relating to the area that we're talking about. There have been very, very many over very, very many years, and all of them include data that could be useful for this investigation into air quality. Just most recently would be the Levelling Up Fund bid, which again had consultants' reports embedded within it. It struck me, looking at the long list, that thousands and thousands of pounds have already been spent on consultants looking into the situation that we're in. I'm also concerned at the technical needs that this report have, and I know the very hard working officers that have been working on this have limited amount of time. I'm really concerned that in order to deliver a smart program, an action plan that is measurable and timely, that we need to have constant monitoring, and I can't see that within the paperwork of the action plan. So that's really my question. You know, can we draw all this together? Can we look at some of the reports that have already been written and read across? I know some of those also exist at county level. So I think, leading on from Nick's question as well, that I'm intrigued to see that county and district will work together and continue the dialogue with the haulage companies. But again, what does that look like? What are the terms of reference? I hope that we're going to see those, and again, that it can be costed and can be within a particular timescale that's going to do something soon. Thank you.
Third speaker is Mr. Curry, local resident.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
I first of all must declare that I am a town councillor in Ashbourne Town Council, but I'm here in a personal capacity, not in that capacity. Your agenda item 13 deals with progressing the feedback from a consultation process. This was deeply flawed and badly conducted. It gave no alternative options, provided no facility within the consultation questionnaire to suggest other options, and avoided the question on whether or not respondents believed the proposals could make a significant improvement. There was no intention to engage with the public. Instead, there's been an attempt to enable the maintenance of some mirage of credibility for an inadequate plan through a disingenuous process. I need to warn the Council that after the considerable delay in achieving even this consultation phase for the air quality management plan, there are two considerable risks in the position in which the new council finds itself. The first of these risks is in respect to the reputation and standing of this council, should the draft plan be referred back to the council by the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which seems very likely. I base this assumption on the fact that when DEFRA reported back after analysis of a provisional draft plan, a specific criticism was that no data had been provided within the plan in respect of the measurable contribution that each of the measures proposed will make to reducing the level of pollution. Nor was there any data on a time frame within which each of these measures would deliver the improvements required. Although further development of the proposals has taken place at a theoretical level, only minor tree lopping has actually been carried out, the other proposals still only being discussed, with no dates of implementation, let alone achievement, being included in the plan. The new council finds itself in a position where, because of the shameful delay in dealing with discharging the air quality management area designation, it is understandably concerned about delaying further. But you should not be railroaded into giving credence to a clearly deficient plan, nor risk the shame of having ownership of a plan which is referred back by DEFRA. The second and even more serious risk is that all of this sorry process condemns the community of Ashbourne to continue to be blighted by the pollution, not only through nitrous oxide but also particulates, long into the future. Only a compliant, meaningful, implemented plan can reduce the threat being faced, particularly by the old, the vulnerable and children. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, that's the conclusion of members of the public's questions and statements. So the next item on the agenda invites members to declare any disclosable pecuniary or personal interest they may have in respect of items of business to be considered tonight. Councillor Dobbs.
Reference item 13, which now isn't item 13. I am also a member of the Buxton Road Residents Group.
Oh, Councillor Bates, sorry. Yeah.
Well, so I'd like to declare at the time I'm Ashbourne Town Council and
Right.
I'm Ashbourne Mayor at the moment.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bates. Right, next item, item 5, is to receive questions submitted by notice. Sorry? Oh, Councillor Chapman as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a declaration of interest, but it's just that I would like to personally, emphatically refute the inference made by the first speaker that I was, or any other member, was in cahoots with the mineral extraction industry. That's an absolute untruth.
Thank you. Right, item 5 on the agenda is to receive questions submitted by notice from members, and no members have submitted any questions for this meeting, so we can move on to item 6, which is to receive the draft minutes of the Local Plan Subcommittee meeting held on the 3rd of July. So can I invite Councillor O'Brien as chair of the subcommittee to propose that the minutes be received?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to formally propose that this committee approves the minutes of the Local Plan Subcommittee. You'll note from the minutes circulated with this agenda that there were 8 recommendations made to that subcommittee. They were all approved unanimously. What the recommendations do is to build on the work done so far on the review of the local plan, but they also reflect the refreshed approach to the review, which is being adopted by the Progressive Alliance administration. So they encompass a renewed focus on sustainable communities, where everyone will have access to housing they can afford, local jobs and local services, where our green and blue infrastructure will be protected and enhanced, where we will make sure that there is adequate infrastructure in place to support any proposed new development, and where we will engage fully with our local communities to help us shape the future of our district. And last but not least, we will, as a subcommittee, as members, proactively engage with members of the Peak District National Park Authority so that we can together have joined up planning rather than as at present we have policies pulling in opposite direction. Thank you, Chair.
A seconder? That's right, Archie. Thank you. We'll go to the vote then. All in favour of accepting these minutes? Okay. Is that unanimous? I think it is. Okay, thank you. Right. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, I intend to move to agenda item 13, which we're bringing forward for the benefit of the members of the public who've come this evening. So, to my extreme right, Tim Braun, Director of Regulatory Services, Amanda Goodwill, who's Environmental Health Manager, and Karen Carpenter, Environmental Health Officer, who will address or present the report about this item on the Air Quality Action Plan in Ashbourne.
Thank you, Chair. This is very much an interim report that updates members on the mechanism of the consultation rather than the results. The reason it can't be any more than that is that the extract from the SurveyMonkey consultation that was undertaken was only provided to officers on Tuesday this week. So clearly there's a lot of work to do to analyse that. The consultation did complete itself on the 26th of June, and from an officer point of view, we consider it to be very successful. There are some in excess of 400 responses to the online survey, 11 written submissions, and included in the online survey, there was the opportunity for free text for people to suggest other measures, and some people chose to use that mechanism. We did, in fact, receive 2,628 free-form comments, all of which have to be analysed. At the moment, officers are working their way through all those comments to assess them for data protection implications. Unfortunately, some people have chosen to name names in there for whatever reason, which needs to be taken out before we can share that. Clearly, those responses need to be shared with our partners and with elected members in drawing up a report for the next meeting of this committee that looks at the outcomes of that consultation. That's quite a chunk of work to do, and we'll be sharing that through the leaders group initially in order to help draw up the report. In responding to a couple of the issues raised by members of the public, thank you to them, a working group to assess progress on the action plan is something that officers would really agree with. We have a small working group that has looked at the development of that, and that could form the basis for something similar going forward. In terms of monitoring in real time, which one of the members of the public mentioned, that will also be provided through the county council. That will also be provided through the county council, the work the county council are doing. We understand they're progressing the procurement of that system at the moment. That system will measure nitrogen dioxide in the area. It will also measure fine particulates. There are two fractions of particulate matter that are specified in the air quality strategy. They are getting a bit technical. They are PM10 and PM2.5, which are particles smaller than 10 microns and smaller than 2.5 microns. So the very, very fine particulate matter. Those will also be monitored using the equipment, or sorry, PM10 at least will be monitored using the equipment that the county council are procuring. Other than that, I've nothing to add to the report. It is very much an interim report, we're aware of that, but we thought the members would be interested in seeing how the consultation had gone on.
Right, now we have questions. Yes, Councillor G.
Could I just ask a question of officers about this proposed working group? Do you have an idea of what the remit would be of the working group?
I think the suggestion from Mr. Bishop, was that it would evaluate the success or otherwise of the action plan, and that seems like a very fair thing for the working group to do.
And is there a sort of structure, the way it would work in terms of, would it have minutes, would it have some sort of voting rights or whatever? How would it work in terms of practicalities?
I think that's something that we can thrash the detail out of. I'm not sure that it could be a decision-making body. The decision-making body in the end is this authority, but clearly it can make recommendations. And it has to be said, the dialogue in the working group has been useful so far. I can't see that it wouldn't continue to be useful into the future. Clearly, the point of any action plan that's put together is that it reduces levels of nitrogen dioxide in the air quality management area. That's what everybody wants. And it's only right that members of the public can see that or otherwise.
Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a proposed amendment already circulated about fine particulate matter, but are you saying that we do that already, Tim? I know it's technical. Thank you.
That amendment was discussed with officers, so you know it's nothing. It's no surprise to us there. So thank you, Councillor Dobbs, for that. What we've got in Ashbourne is we've got an air quality management area that's been declared for nitrogen dioxide. It hasn't been declared for fine particulate matter. Longer standing members and Councillor Dobbs will remember that part of the process in drawing up the air quality management area or defining the air quality management area was something called a detailed assessment, which was a consultant's report looking into levels of pollution in that area. One of the things that considered was fine particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5. That work was the work that they undertook was modelling. It wasn't actual measurement on site, picking up the member of the public's comment earlier. So it's modelling, but nevertheless it predicted that levels of particulate matter in that area would be no more than 40% of the air quality objective. So it predicted they would be well within the limits that are set by government. Based on those figures, this council couldn't declare an air quality management area on the basis of particulates. Now, given that the county council are purchasing equipment to measure PM10 anyway, it obviously makes sense to monitor that through the working group and make sure that the calculations that were done as part of that detailed assessment, the modelling that was done as part of that detailed assessment was correct or otherwise. If it was incorrect, we'll need to correct it, of course, but the measurement is the proper way to do that.
Are there any further questions before we move to debate and proposal for, I think, Councillor Dobbs, yeah.
I've actually got 3 questions. Shall I do them one at a time? Is that okay? Just picking up on what Councillor Hobson said, in fact, the government initiative that I quote in my amendment is actually talking about the new standard to which we're heading in terms of fine particulates. So it's kind of responding to that. But my first question, sorry, in section 2.8, you describe data obtained from diffusion tubes as indicative and suggest that data obtained from real-time monitoring is likely to increase the accuracy of monitoring. However, in the results that you provide to the public, the levels of nitrogen dioxide are quoted to 3 significant figures, which has an implication for the level of precision. And I also understand that virtually all of the AQMAs in the country have been declared after considering diffusion tube data alone. So what are you suggesting by this indicative statement?
Diffusion tube I'm not sure if members have seen diffusion tubes. Diffusion tubes are little plastic tubes that are put up on structures in the area and into which air circulates over a period of time. It's a 4-week monitoring cycle, isn't it, Karen? I wouldn't want to pretend that they're huge, expensive pieces of scientific equipment that can be relied upon to be completely accurate in that sense. They do, because they're out for a long time, they do provide a reasonable indication. And Councillor Dobbs is quite correct that generally speaking, air quality management areas declared for nitrogen dioxide will rely on data obtained from diffusion tubes. The level of significance, the number of decimal points they're quoted to reflects the fact that partly how the results come back to us, but also the fact we're averaging over a 12-month period, which ends up with something along those lines. I wouldn't want to pretend to anybody in this room or people watching on YouTube that we could guarantee that they are accurate to 2 decimal points. That we wouldn't want to do. But they are the basis on which these air quality management areas are declared, and they are considered to be suitable for that purpose.
Thank you. As a chartered chemist, I would like to point out that I think actually diffusion tubes are slightly better than you suggest. But moving on, in the RSK detailed assessment that triggered the declaration of the AQMA in May 2021, 8 receptors, which is the jargon for houses where people live, are identified by the modelling as having a level of nitrogen dioxide that is over the air quality objective, that is 40 micrograms per cubic metre. How many houses do you believe are currently over the limit or within 10% of the limit as guidance suggests?
I would say that the situation remains as it was when we declared the air quality management area, except the trend is slightly downwards. So they're still within 10%, but for the last 3 years, the original tube that we made the declaration based upon has now gone under the air quality objective for those 3 years. However, it remains within the 10%, therefore we consider it to be a level of interest or concern.
Thank you, Karen. I would tend to agree, although I make it that we've lost one and gained one. And I think all the houses to the north of that tube would still be exactly as before, well within, well above the legal limit of 40. My final question, I promise you. Many of those who responded to the consultation wrote lengthy comments and suggestions. You've hinted at who will be appraising those comments. That will be a working group that appraise those comments, or could you clarify who will be involved?
I think this goes to the heart of how the new council wants to work, doesn't it? As members of CLT have been informed here, there very much wants to be a partnership between members and officers in pulling together reports. And the way that it's been proposed that we approach that is, first of all, to approach group leaders to ask them who they would like to be involved in the development of those reports. And that's what we'll be doing, if I can, tomorrow. I've unexpectedly had to attend an emergency planning meeting about upcoming weather at the weekend. But if I get the chance to do it, Councillor Dobbs, I'll be doing it tomorrow. If not, it'll be Monday.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. I'm not a chartered chemist. However, I am a little bit concerned when I see the chart on your report, and thank you for the report. It appears that when there are two tubes, in 2020, the sensor opposite 25 Buxton Road showed an exceedance, as did the sensor on the lamppost 1420 on Buxton Road in 2021. But are we being consistent? Because there's no further data on those areas. We know that they were exceeding, but there's no further data after that in that area. So surely to get consistent figures, they should be consistently in the same location. Would that be reasonable or not? You may tell me that you've gone and relocated them across the road, but to me, consistency is key, so you get a good benchmark. I've got other questions, but if you want to answer that one, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Chair. The initial tube that was moved, that was opposite number 25, that was recommended to be moved in the detailed assessment because of the tree canopy. It's not an ideal location for a tube, so we moved it to the lamppost, but still that felt a little bit still within the tree canopy, so that tube went to the top of the hill on the Bowling Green pub on the Buxton Road itself, simply because in conjunction as well with requests, it was deemed that we wanted to look at the extent of the air quality management area so that we could make sure we define where the pollution goes to and how high it goes. So to some degree that tube, we've retained the original tube, but that tube has moved about in order to define the levels of pollution up and down the road so that we can look a little bit more closely at where we focus our action.
Can I just come back on that one quickly, and then I've got two more questions, I'm sorry. So one of the speakers, I forget who it was, mentioned about the tree canopy is the only thing that's really been achieved in 2.5 years, I think it was. And have we gone back to that location where the first tube was in exceedance opposite 25, put another tube there and seeing if the effect of what we have done has had a beneficial effect in that area?
We haven't as yet. I normally move the tubes in January because we report on a calendar year, but if there is a desire within the local community or from this committee, then I'm very happy to put a tube there.
From my perspective, it shows that some of the intervention has worked, but thank you. The other thing is, one of the gentlemen mentioned about, and I think Mrs. Conti said as well, about the minerals companies. Now, we've been going 2.5 years,
and it isn't just 2.5 years that it's been going, it's 2.5 years since we've been acting. But what have the mineral companies proffered up? I mean, if you've got conscientious businesses, you should really, they're aware of it. What is the result of the consultation and the engagement with the mineral companies, and what reductions, if any, of NOx are anticipated? And what have these companies offered to do in the interim, right? Because it's happening here and now, to mitigate the issue. Have we approached them, and are they doing anything at all to mitigate or try to mitigate what they're doing? Thank you.
That's an activity that takes place by the mineral planners at Derbyshire County Council. They have routine liaison meetings on all matters for minerals, and it is proposed that the county highways section liaises with the people who attend those, and that the matter is brought up. They are looking to work with a local firm to do some work on that. I don't know the exact details of it, but they're trying to link up with what they call technology partners. So that is in the early stages yet. The consultation did go out to the hauliers, although as the consultation remains anonymous, I couldn't say who of those did a reply.
Because obviously one of the points was that we're going to work with Derbyshire County Council, and it doesn't appear as though you've had any feedback from Derbyshire County Council about their approach to the mineral companies, which is a bit shocking. I know the report, it's gone through an assessment and then an action plan. That's where we're going. But how are we bringing the county council to check, and how are we monitoring what they're doing, and how are we assuring that they're feeding back to us? That was a supplementary question, if that's all right. Thank you.
Once a plan is agreed and in place, then I will need to report back annually to DEFRA on the performance of the plan. So once we've moved to getting the plan agreed, then those are the things that we will have to, as part of presumably the new working group that has been suggested, that is something we could look at, but that is something that will then kick in once we've agreed the plan.
But in the meantime, it's got to stay as it is.
Well,
so that's absolutely fine. So, and also finally, you'll be pleased to hear, can you please confirm that at point 6.1 of the Air Quality Action Plan, that will be continually, that document, when it is created and in action, it'll be a continually evolving document capable of amendment and update, and also driven by updated data and evidence, ensuring that the Air Quality Action Plan is current and relevant. Is that definitely going to be the case?
That is the intention of the plan. It's not designed to be an once forever document. If we find evidence that we have to amend the plan, then the plan should be amended.
And whose responsibility will it be to there's two bits. Whose responsibility will it be to update that? And how are we going to ensure that Derbyshire County Council are feeding everything that they have got to us in a timely manner? Thank you.
Once the plan's in place, then those structures will have to be set up in terms of the working groups and the feeding of information between parties. We do regularly meet with the county in order to update, and we'll have to formalise that arrangement once the plan's in place so that I can report back on everything.
I should add as well at that point, Chair, that there is a formal duty, a requirement for the County Council and the District Council to work together on this. So it's not just because they want to, they have to.
Let's hope so. Thank you.
Councillor G, do you have another question? I thought you got another question. You haven't? No, it's actually Councillor Murphy.
Do you want to let Councillor Murphy go first, and I'll come in afterwards?
Thank you. So what we're hearing is this equipment that we're using isn't 100% accurate in a sense. It's not. We need to get better monitoring equipment to be sure of the actual data. So I hear what Councillor Wayne is saying, but how could we approach the haulage industry? They pick holes in the fact that on the data we've got at the moment and the methods we use to collect it. wouldn't it be better to approach the hauliers once we've actually got that proper scientific equipment making proper measurements? Well, let's put it this way. Well, no, but the haulage industry, I'm sure they've got deeper pockets than us, and they would probably just shoot us down in flames without actually, having, 100% accurate data. So I think we need to be wary.
Any comments from officers?
I think we can rely on the diffusion tube data to. I mean, we're relying on the diffusion tube data to declare an action, declare a management area, and work up an action plan. And I think we can rely on it to initiate discussions with the haulage industry. If we were moving to look to require the haulage industry to do something that they didn't want to do, there might be a different discussion to be had. However, the real-time monitoring, which will provide more timely, not just more accurate, more timely information, more of it, well, it shouldn't be too long in being on site, as we understand it. That is being provided by the County Council, so I can't give you an exact timetable, but in communications Karen had with them today, they've indicated that they're perfectly happy for us to say that they're in the procurement process.
Can I just come back? The hauliers have got a fantastic fleet of wagons these days. Most of them are Euro 6. From what I've heard people say before, that Euro 6 would meet the standard, which would be allowed probably to come through the town. They wouldn't be sort of contributing to the issues. Most of these quarrying companies and whatever, most of their vehicles are Euro 6. So maybe they're not maybe the quarrying industry isn't the problem.
Just coming on that, it's fair to say that the issue of Euro 6 compliant lorries did come up in the consultation, came up in the public meetings, and we will report back on whatever we get from the consultation that mentions that. Largely in agreement with what you just said, Councillor Murphy. Sure, I didn't add that at the beginning.
Councillor G, another question.
Yeah, just a couple of questions on this. Obviously being slightly new to this council, but I do know that this sort of air quality management has a cost to it. And do we have any information about the overall cost to the air quality management? And also I see that we're just discussing Ashbourne, and are we just targeting the hauliers? I mean, are they completely to blame for the particulates in the air, etc.? And do we have any issue with air quality in Bakewell or Wirksworth or Matlock? And, what is the outcome and the mission statement for this work that we're doing? Obviously people drive about on the daily work. They go, individuals take the kids to school in cars. That's part of the economic activity of the area. But are we just targeting hauliers in Ashbourne? That's really the question.
If I kick off, Chair, Karen might need to come in on this. We undertake routine diffusion tube monitoring at various locations around the whole of the district, and we target those diffusion tubes at areas where the system indicates there might be a problem. So you look at traffic numbers and road conditions, and you try and work out areas that might be a problem. I can't remember what monitoring is undertaken in Bakewell, but Karen may need to come in on that particular bit. What we had in Ashbourne is that a localised hotspot, if you like, of air pollution was found, and there is no doubt it was found. The levels of nitrogen dioxide were found to exceed the air quality objective, which is how these things are defined. That hotspot exists because of a number of factors: the amount of traffic that uses that particular road, and the conditions that exist in relation to that road. It's narrow; lorries have to stop and start; they have to pass each other. Pollution has been kept in by virtue of tree canopy and the canyon type effect of the sides of the road. There's a whole heap of things that added up to a problem that have added up to and continue to add up to a problem in that area, and that's why we're addressing that particular issue. It wasn't declared because of lorries. It was declared because the result of lorries going up and down there and other vehicles, but predominantly HGVs, was that we had an exceedance of the air quality objective. If we find that those conditions exist elsewhere in the district, then we'll be looking to declare air quality management areas in those areas too. We haven't found that as of yet. So an example, in the early days of undertaking this monitoring, it was expected that there would be a problem in Matlock Bath because the word canyon effect was described. However, it's quite a wide canyon, and air pollution can dispersed quite effectively there. So although we did a fair amount of monitoring there, no problem was found, and we moved on and looked at other areas. And we continue to do that. Karen, you've probably got more accurate information than me.
Not really, just to say that we do a series of monitoring across the district, and that is, there is a guidance document from DEFRA as to where, based on evidence, that there would likely be a problem, and so we utilise those criteria in order to choose the places we put the tubes. In Bakewell, it's just on the A6 at the what was Dale's Housing. I'm not entirely sure now who might run that particular place, but it's on one of the properties on the A6, just going into Bakewell, just after past the ABC, and then you get into the built-up area, and it's just there. Well, most of the measures are being provided by Derbyshire County Council. So in terms of costs, they have submitted their cost estimates, and those have gone in the Air Quality Action Plan, the costings that have been provided.
Okay, members, has that exhausted the questions? In which case, we want to move to debate. I think I need to get somebody to propose the recommendations in the report. I'm aware that Councillor Dobbs wishes to propose an amendment, and I wonder if he wish to propose the recommendations from the report as well as his own proposal, so that these are the substantive motion before this committee. Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to do that. So this motion will be to accept recommendations 1 and 2, and to thank the officers for providing that, and to add this, which I think you have a copy in front of you, which reads 3, that in response to the government policy paper published 28th April 2023, Air Quality Strategy Framework for Local Authority Delivery, and other concerns, this council acknowledges the need to broaden air pollution monitoring to include levels of fine particulate matter. So there will be 3 parts to the 3 recommendations in the motion. And if I may, Chair, if I could talk about the report first of all, and then move on to the amendment that I'm proposing. Is that okay? Thank you. When the Ashbourne Air Quality Management Area was declared in May 2021, I had not imagined that we'd be still considering possible mitigation measures over 2 years later. The action plan on which consultation has recently been completed is not the one that I and many other Ashbourne residents had hoped for. However, we are, I understand, locked into a process, and I assume we have to let it run its course. The scrutiny of the action plan will presumably take place at the next meeting of this committee. Indeed, we've heard that that will be the case. However, I take some encouragement from the fact that any action plan does not have to define or restrict a local authority in what it does to help reduce the exposure of its residents to polluted air. This is, after all, the central thrust of the 1995 Environment Act. The production of an action plan and its approval by DEFRA is just a mechanism to check that a local authority is actually taking action. I do hope that we can dispel the idea that we have to wait until we get a tick from DEFRA before we can do anything to enable any mitigation, and are then stuck with those actions, whether or not they prove to be effective. This is simply not correct, and I'm encouraged by the response to Councillor Wayne's question in that regard. So to move on to fine particulate monitoring, I think it will have been hard to escape the news items in recent months about the hazards to health of fine particulates, the so-called PM10s and PM2.5s. The County Council, in their October 2022 air quality strategy, suggested that there are over 500 excess deaths each year in Derby and Derbyshire due to PM10 alone. Yet there are very few locations where they are currently being measured, with none in Derbyshire Dales. Levels are being estimated by computer modelling, but that can miss hotspots. Ashbourne has anecdotal evidence that we might have a problem from fine particulates. The first is the level of solid material deposited on all surfaces around the air quality management area. This manifests itself in a variety of forms, including blackened windows and woodwork, tide marks of black powder on pavements. I believe we had a slide for that. Tommy, have we got that available? I forgot to remind people. But anyway, it's a picture of the black tide marks on St John Street. You've probably all seen it. Currently kept in check by diligent and continuing work by the Clean and Green team, many thanks to them. And the second piece of anecdotal evidence is the apparent incidence of respiratory disorders in the area, for example, asthma. It seems appropriate, therefore, that this council takes on board the implications of the latest government strategy paper, which requires local authorities to reduce levels of air pollutants, and we include fine particulates as the council establishes a baseline from which they will attempt to reduce levels. Thank you, Chair.
I have a second for this amended motion. 3. Who was first? Councillor Archer. Okay, thank you. Right, we move on to debate now. Who wants to contribute to the debate as opposed to questions?
All 3 recommendations.
Yeah. We're debating all 3 recommendations. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know, with the recommendations, it says incorporating measures. Do I take it that the measures are the 2.3? Or are there any other measures? It says that the council reconfirms its commitment to incorporating measures in the action plan. Do we know exactly what those measures are?
Tim, can you advise on that?
Well, at this stage, that hasn't been determined. That's the report that will come before you, Councillor G, in September. I think this is a general comment about making sure that whatever measures go in the action plan are effective.
But would I be, if I'm voting on this, would I be voting on measures that I don't know what they are?
This is it's difficult for me to contribute to debate in this way, but you'd be voting for whatever measures come forward. You want them to be effective. That's, I think, what the purpose of that part of the recommendation is.
Yeah. Councillor Wayne. Add a word, you say. Yeah. Subsequent measures. You say.
I'm just happy to amend the proposal to that effect.
Are you happy with that slight amendment, Councillor Dobbs?
I mean, you choose a whole raft of appropriate words. I mean, appropriate measures. Subsequent seems to be subsequent on what?
Yeah.
Agreed measures, if you like. Incorporating agreed measures, that would do, wouldn't it? If you want some clarification, to be honest, I don't really think.
Oh, sorry, I could come across a situation where you want some sort of one of these ULEV sort of zones in Ashbourne, stopping people driving into the town centre. And would I be voting to support that if I'm voting for this tonight? So, yeah, so it would be a different vote. Yeah.
So, are you happy with agreed measures then as a inserted word? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. Any further speakers? Yes, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to endorse the recommendations, and I would also like to thank the members of the public for their contribution and members of the committee this evening for their contributions. I think I'm sure the new administration is aware that we need to up our game on this particular matter, and that's what we intend to do. I think we're also aware that we need to, what I would say, reset our relationship with the county council to establish a more positive dialogue and continue to work together to achieve a quantifiable and meaningful reduction in pollution in Ashbourne, and that again is what we intend to do. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank our members of staff here this evening for their professional advice and knowledge that they've given to us. I certainly wouldn't be wanting to tell Karen when to move one of these devices, and I will be guided by your professional expertise in that matter. This is an interim report, and we're talking about mitigating measures. I'm sure we all have concerns about the air quality, but nobody's mentioned what would be the answer would be the bypass, and that's something that hopefully will be coming in due course. Upping our game, I think that that isn't just a criticism of the previous administration, that's a criticism of our district council officers and our county council officers, who have in fact worked incredibly hard. These things, I think it's been said in previous committees, data has to be collected over a long period of time and analysed. You can't just do it in 3 months or 6 months. So I will continue to be guided by the professional expertise. I'm always pleased to hear from members of the public and my fellow councillors, but I cannot accept the comment by one of the speakers about the bombastic interference from Councillor Spencer. Councillor Spencer is Ashbourne born and bred. He loves Ashbourne. He's been an elected member for decades. Nobody cares more about Ashbourne than Councillor Spencer. He came to speak to this committee several committee times ago, and I know Simon Spencer is passionate about this subject. So that's my final comment at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Buckler.
Yeah, it's about recommendation 1, and it sort of feeds into the point that Councillor Hobson just made. Pending the eventual construction of a relief road, with the climate change implications that we've got going on, I think it would be really, it's really important that we get these measures which work, irrespective of whether there's a relief road built, because we're not, we're absolutely not certain that a relief road will be built because of the climate change implications and the government's actions, the requirements under the Climate Change Act. So I'm completely in support of the recommendations, but I would like to raise a concern about that part of the recommendation.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I don't want this to descend into a political sort of fight, because it shouldn't be. Politics shouldn't be brought into it. It's about the residents of Ashbourne. In terms of the comments made by Councillor Hobson, I agree with some of them, absolutely. The idea of officers and relying on officers' expertise, I would agree with, but equally we also have a duty as members who know the situation on the ground very well to direct officers, and I think that's all we're talking about doing, directing them so we can use their expertise in the best possible way. With relation to that, Councillor Dobbs, I for one, as formerly the only sort of political alliance member of council before the last election, I'm very pleased that Councillor Dobbs has been elected, because he has been a driving force behind this, and actually he did a lot of work initially as a resident that then helped our officers to come in and use their expertise. So I think that sort of symbiotic relationship between residents, members and the expertise of our officers is what we need, and it's a big relief to me to be sitting in this sort of meeting now. I've got Councillor Dobbs here who really knows this topic exceptionally well, and can hopefully work really constructively with the officers to get more action, and maybe that might be a way we can up our game, just because we happen to have that expertise and level of interest, and somebody who's a member who lives in this area and understands it on the ground really well. That isn't necessarily criticism of what happened formerly, it's just a comment on the expertise and the knowledge that we've now got that we perhaps didn't have previously. And in terms of the comment about Councillor Spencer, again, I don't want to make any personal reference to Councillor Spencer. I'm sure he does love Ashbourne very much. I think it's going a bit far to say he loves it more than anyone else. That's perhaps a little bit an overstatement. Lots of us love Ashbourne. I don't know. I'm not going to get into an all loving who loves Ashbourne most, but it's a bold comment to make, to say he loves it more than anybody else. I think that the point being made there was we've got to be careful while supporting the concept of and the idea of a bypass, and we all recognise that is the ultimate solution. Please do not misunderstand me here. But I think the point about Councillor Spencer was made because we've got to be careful that the idea of the bypass coming quickly is not used as a possible excuse to stop more short-term measures happening now, which we need now. Because the problem's here now, the bypass is not. So I think that was where they were coming from. But fair point, perhaps the way the wording was used about Councillor Spencer, fair point. But I think that was the point that was trying to be made.
Contributions. Councillor Boothroyd.
Taking on one of the comments from a speaker about establishing a working group, can we propose an amendment that is actually written into this recommendations, that we establish a working group including residents on the air quality management plan?
Thank you, Councillor Boothroyd. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I understand Councillor Dobbs is an expert in this area. He spent a lot of time working on this project and whatever. He even, helped some of our colleagues, officers, to locate some of these devices for doing the testing, which was reported at one of our last CNE meetings before we had the election. I can't help thinking, this gentleman on that side of the room who highly politicised this subject, and it was used in the elections and whatever, and there was no need to do that, because there's a lot of people. We only have to look at your literature over time, and you're in focus and whatever. You highly politicise this. It'll be very interesting to see feedback that we actually get from the consultation. I've had a lot of people come up to me who've said, they do not want to see, traffic removed from the centre of Ashbourne in such a way that, HGVs are directed on other routes, because I know some of those other routes and they're just not suitable for wagons and whatever. So I've got a fear that, there's a master plan to remove a lot of vehicles from the centre of Ashbourne. You'll say no, but we'll wait and see.
Councillor Wayne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to just echo what Councillor O'Brien says. The Progressive Alliance are trying to move this forward. We don't want to politicise things. We do not want to politicise this issue. It isn't a political issue. Everybody should be working together. We should all be working together for this not to take another 2.5 years to sort out. We need to be sorting this out very, very quickly. And we'll let it go through the process and we'll see what comes out the other side. But let's not argue about politics. Thank you.
If there are no further speakers, can I call on Councillor Dobbs to sum up on the amendment? Oh, sorry, Councillor Boothroyd, you'd like to come in?
Bit new to this, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
Can I propose that we add as an amendment that we establish a working group including residents to the recommendations?
Right.
Is that right?
Just to help and avoid amendments and everything else, Councillor Dobbs, would you be happy to incorporate that within your proposal to the meeting?
Certainly to ease I'm pretty sure it would happen anyway, but yes, just to formalise it, I'm happy to. You can think of the words, James, that would be great.
Yes. Would you like to sum up on the debate on the amendment particularly?
Happy to do that, Chair, thank you. I think the important point, if I may, just to reply directly to Councillor Murphy, we're doing this because it's the law. We have no choice. The air quality is illegal. We are required to do something that will have an effect. You cannot poison people, and a lot of people are dying prematurely because of the levels of pollution that we're talking about. We need to act. We'll have to do the best we possibly can within our powers to mitigate. And if we don't do that, we're in contravention of the law. Thank you.
Just come back briefly.
Yeah, sorry. On the issue of this working group, I'm not against a working group, but I'm slightly against bringing it in this paper tonight, because I think we need some more detail. about exactly how this working group is going to be constructed, what its remit is, and I think councillors need to be informed of that in the round, because asking us to suddenly vote and put it in this paper just on the hoof, I don't think that's really proper procedure.
Can I ask you, James, just to have you summarise the proposal from Councillor Boothroyd?
There's no elegant wording for it, Chair, other than that a working group comprising councillors, officers and members of the public be established. I'm sure colleagues can come up with something at the end there for the exact purpose of the working group, which may already exist.
If I may, Chair, the only other thing I was going to suggest, if it helps move it forward tonight, we'd be happy to commit to coming up with something at the next report that establishes that in September. Entirely up to members, but we're happy to do that. Councillor Boothroyd, if that helps.
I'm happy with that too, if it counts.
Councillor Hobson.
Chair, that was going to be my point, because if you've got a working group, generally we have numbers of it on it, it's politically proportionate. How do we decide which members of the public are allowed on? I think there's quite a bit of work that needs to go before you just say residents, how many, where from, what geographical area. There are lots of questions to be asked. I think it sounds a bit ad hoc just to, not that I'm not wanting to listen to residents, I just think to actually set up a working group in this manner just seems a little bit ahead of itself.
Does anyone want to try to summarise the feelings of members and come up with either delete that particular reference or to substantiate it in the motion?
If I could, Chair, perhaps we could add to that proposal that the scope and terms of reference of the working group be presented for consideration at the next meeting of this committee.
I'm happy to
happy with that.
take on that.
Right,
yeah.
Okay.
So if James could read it back exactly what we're agreeing to, voting on.
Yeah.
So you've got the two recommendations in the report. You've got the amendment that's been circulated on paper, which is to add the recommendation that in response to the government policy paper published 28th of April 2023, Air Quality Strategy Framework for Local Authority Delivery, and other concerns, this council acknowledges the need to broaden air pollution monitoring to include levels of fine particulate matter. And then I would suggest the wording for 4 would be that a further report be brought to the next meeting of this committee to establish the terms of reference and scope and membership of a working group.
And you have included the word agreed between incorporating and measures on line 1 of the first recommendation, is that right?
So is that to read agreed measures?
Agreed, yes.
Yeah,
that's what
I'm
we
happy
agreed.
with that.
Yes. Okay. We've got a proposal and a second there, so all in favour of the revised and amended motion? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Oh, it's almost unanimous. Right. Okay. Anyone against? Abstentions? 1 abstention. Right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for attendance, all 3 of you, 4 of you. Thank you. Yeah. Right. We turn to the running order then. So item 7 on the agenda is to report updates to members on the implementation of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund Investment Plan for Derbyshire Dales. That's Giles Dunn. If I can invite him, he's our Regeneration and Place Manager, to introduce this report. Thank you, Giles.
Thank you, Chair, and evening members. So this report covers 3 key areas. One is the progress with the programme, secondly, delivery challenges with the programme, and thirdly, proposals regarding the grant administration of 2 parts of the programme. One is the business grants and one is the community grant schemes that we have tendered to Derbyshire Dales CVS to administer on our behalf. So just as a bit of a recap for new members to council, this programme, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, is the domestic replacement for what we used to have through the European Union by way of funding programmes. So things like European Social Fund, European Regional Development Fund, the Rural Development Programme for England, the LEADER programme, they were all European funded schemes. They've now concluded This programme replaces them and runs for 2 years to March 2020-25. In terms of the funding allocation to Derbyshire Dales, it's 2.7 million in total, and that includes the Rural Prosperity Fund, which is a rural top-up. It's not a separate programme, it's a top-up to the existing allocation to recognise the rurality, basically, of Derbyshire Dales. So not all councils have received this. The whole of the Derbyshire Dales is classed as rural. That's why Derbyshire Dales has received additional funding to recognise that fact. So the programme got underway in January 2023 following government approval in December of last year. You'll have seen from the paper we had a delayed start. We've had some capacity challenges which we've been working through in the last few months. So basically the programme is behind schedule, but we are working hard to recover that position. And I'd just like to thank Nancy Maitland and Jill Chapman for their hard work. They've both put in extra hours to get us to the stage we're at and to get these programmes moving forward. So thank you to them. Within the report, there's a series of actions proposed to try and catch up spend, as I've indicated. And I've got a few updates on the report itself, but just in terms of the current position, we put in a proposal to government to carry forward expenditure that wasn't committed and spent in 2022-23, to carry that forward to 2023-24, i.e. the current financial year, and that's set out in table 1 within the report. That has just been approved. At the end of June, we received approval from government to that proposal. So that's the profile we're now working to. In terms of the other updates to the report, I'm just going to walk you through those. So if you bear with me, I'll refer to different sections of the report where we've got some updates to add to the information that's in front of you. So page 33, I'm starting on section 2.1. Post of Economic Development Manager, which will oversee that role will oversee this programme going forward. Good news is that we've now recruited a new Economic Development Manager who's accepted the role and is due to start with us in September. So that will significantly improve the capacity available to the economic development side of the team. On page 34, section 2.4, you'll see that we're also looking to recruit a business advisor. We interviewed on the 22nd of June, and again I'm glad to say that we've made an appointment to that role, and that position will be filled on the 31st of July with a full-time business advisor. In terms of the other updates, page 37, the business support and advice programme. So you'll see in there that I've referred to the business growth programme, which was a scheme that we put out to tender with our partner North East Derbyshire District Council. Again, that tender process concluded in June, and a provider has been appointed to commence the delivery of that programme at the end of this month. I can't say who that is just at the moment because we're in a standstill period as part of the tender process and the evaluation. But we anticipate that programme getting underway in earnest in August of this year. So those updates will hopefully help us to start moving forward now on the programme in earnest. In terms of the current delivery risks, I've highlighted where we've got key challenges at the moment. There's two areas in particular. One is the Matlock Western Gateway scheme, aka the Bakewell Road project. This funding contribution is principally towards the public realm elements of that project, and I'm due to bring a report to members at council at the end of this month to talk about that further with the options that we're looking at for that scheme going forward. And the second area is the rural innovation grants. Obviously the appointments that I've mentioned, and also the appointment of a provider for the business growth programme, which will bring additional appraisal capacity, so grant appraisal capacity to the programme as well. Both of those will help us to move forward. The other thing to say is that our business development grant, so our mid-tier grant, which offers grants up to £25,000 to businesses, that was launched last month. That's being delivered in-house, and we've had 10 applications in process to date. We expect more to follow over the summer. The other area that I just wanted to highlight was on section 3.5 of the report, which is the proposal to include an additional exceptional waiver within our contract standing orders to increase the threshold for quotations to 75,000 for supplies and works for both businesses and community groups applying for UK Share Prosperity Fund grants. The guidance that came out with the UK Share Prosperity Fund programme, that the central government guidance was that any single contract value with above 25,000 required a full formal tender process, which we consider to be prohibitive to businesses and community organisations to go through such a process. That is much lower than other thresholds that we've seen with previous programmes such as the LEADER programme. So we want to try and address that through an exceptional waiver that's specific to this programme. So there is a proposal in the report to do so, which if agreed tonight will then come back to Council at the end of the month. The only other thing I just wanted to point out was that there is a slight drafting error on the first page and the first recommendation of the report. So I'll just flag that now. So hopefully we can agree that as a minor amendment to the report. So on the second line of recommendation 1, after the comma, it should read "and progress to date and delivery risk to be received and agreed." So with that, Chair, I'll take any questions.
I think Councillor Buckley, you've got the first question.
Yeah, and it was a question actually for Giles as he was reading the report, because we don't have printed versions anymore. We don't have page numbers. So please can officers tell us what section it is they're referring to rather than the page, because we've got no idea what page it is you're talking about.
Okay. Do you want me to go back through any of those and refer to sections? Okay.
No, it's fine, thanks.
Can I say I've got page numbers on my...
Yeah, it's on the mod cover. On the mod cover you get...
Just to assist, there's two ways you can look at your reports. You can either click on the individual link to the report, and that won't show the agenda page number, whereas if you click on the overall report pack, it shows the page number on it. So there's two different ways of doing it, but it's a valid point that Councillor Buckler raises.
Yeah, Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question for Giles. Where we've got a fund of 2.7 million split between capital and revenue, what is that split, Giles?
I couldn't give you the exact percentages, but it's close to 50-50.
As it's been slightly amended by Giles this evening then. But, yeah, right, thanks Councillor Chapman. And the seconder? Councillor Dobbs, I think was first, yes. Thank you. I'll move on to debate now. Who would like to speak on this first? Councillor Chapman again.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to give my support for recommendation number 5 with the increase to 75,000. I mean, this is really in the interest of buying equipment. I mean, you know, it's a bit like writing to Ford, Nissan, and Toyota and saying, "Can you send me a tender for my new car?" You know, it's an inhibitive sort of amount that will give a lot quicker response and enable a quicker response for these grants. Thanks.
Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Giles for a good report, excellent report, and the two people that you mentioned earlier on, good team, and you do a grand job. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just go back to Councillor Chapman's question? I just realised I've made a slight error there. The Share Prosperity Fund, which is 1.954 million, is close to 50-50 capital revenue. The Rural Prosperity Fund top-up is all capital. Just to clarify that. Okay.
Thank you, Giles. Any further contributions? Or can we move to a vote then? Councillor Chapman proposed it. Councillor, who seconded it? I can't remember. Dobbs, that's right, yes, seconded it. So, all in favour, please. Well, I better vote myself.
That does make it
unanimous. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Council's capital programme. So, can I invite Karen Henriksen? Oh, yeah, that's sorry, yes. To introduce this report, and then we can and hopefully answer questions on it subsequently. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. So I haven't actually got anything to add to the report. We're asking members to approve 13 new bids to go into the capital programme. If this committee approves them, they'll need to be referred to Council on the 27th of July to be included in the overall programme. Thank you.
Any questions from members? Oh, Councillor Archer.
It might be a stupid question, so sorry if it is. Just obviously, we're voting and approving spending money, which is essentially what we're doing here. And given that there's been an announcement today by the government about public sector pay rises and them not necessarily being funded, do we need to be cautious on that? Is that going to potentially make a hole in the budget, which means we perhaps shouldn't be approving this spending at this point until we've had a chance to assess the impact of that?
Karen, if you'll comment on that.
Well, we do have a general reserve that's got, I think, just about £2 million in for such outcomes as an unfunded pay review. That's what we would use in the past. I'd also add that the capital programme itself and these new bids don't include a great amount in terms of staff time, so the impact on capital projects is quite low. So I would say that it's low risk, and we've got other measures in place to deal with it.
We move on to debate now. No further questions. Councillor Dobbs.
I did have a very much a newbie question. The damaged gate at Ashbourne Cemetery, insurance reserve, an HGV reversed into it, and we're paying. Have I got this wrong?
I'd need to find out the exact details, which I can let you have, Councillor Dobbs, but I'm sure they will have, perhaps they couldn't identify the driver of the vehicle.
Thank you, Karen.
And is that it? That's it for questions. Can we move on to the debate now then? Yeah, okay. Any speakers? Can someone propose the motion then? Councillor Bates, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Wayne, thank you. Right, if no further contributions, can we move to a vote on this then? All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. You're making progress now. Item 9 on the agenda is to consider a report seeking approval to deliver round 4 of the household support fund. Can I invite Simon Bainan, our Housing Strategy Officer, to introduce the report? Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, for members that have not been party to the previous rounds of the Household Support Fund, the Household Support Fund is provided by the Department of Work and Pensions and Government to local authorities to support families with children and individuals in most need. The fund is awarded to upper tier authorities, and they are encouraged to give a proportion to districts and boroughs. Under Household Support Fund 4, Derbyshire County Council received £10.8 million for the financial year 2023-2024 and awarded Derbyshire Dales District Council £185,000. Household Support Fund 4 is funding for the full financial year, where previous rounds were just for 6 months period at each time. We're advised this is the final grant councils will receive under the Household Support Fund. Derbyshire County Council fund a number of initiatives from the Household Support Fund, and districts and boroughs under our allocation are asked to concentrate on issues around housing pressures and preventing homelessness. To date, Derbyshire Dales District Council have received £394,000 over the previous 18 months, which has supported 675 vulnerable households. As with previous rounds, the fund will be split between the housing team, revenues and benefits. The report seeks approval to deliver round 4 of the Household Support Fund as set out in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Simon? Councillor Boothroyd. Okay.
I just have one question. So this is the final round. Do we have any indication of if there's anything coming in the future years for this particular, to replace this fund?
Thank you. At this time, no, we've not been advised of, I said previously it's been 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. We've now been given a full year, but we are advised that this will be the last fund that will be provided by the Department of Work and Pensions. Obviously, we found the fund very useful, and it has impacted on a lot of families. And again, we will take stock of the spending that we've done, the issues that it's raised, and again, maybe through some of our other grants, we will apportion a part of that money. It won't be as significant as this particular amount of money, but yes, it has. We found it saved a lot of prevention, so we will be looking to put a fund forward ourselves after this period.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at paragraph 1.1, I noticed that Derbyshire Dale's got the least amount of handout from County Council, and it was ascertained using the deprivation model. Now, do I assume from that we're the least deprived area in Derbyshire? And also, the second question is that DCC received 10.8 million and passed 1.8 million on to district and borough councils. But looking at it from the way the grant is used, we seem to have areas where we're doing the same thing. I mean, shouldn't it be down to Derbyshire County Council to send it to the councils who are actually basically on the ground and doing it? And if we look at the list of what DCC have done and what we're doing, that some of the areas are quite similar. So I just wondered why is that like it is?
Simon.
Thanks. Yeah, in terms of deprivation, according to the model used by the county, that's the determination that we are the least deprived area across Derbyshire. And other sort of statistics sort of bear out some of that as well, in terms of, again, moving on to some of the additional questions. There is a little bit of overlap. So the largest sort of proportion of that funding goes to the Derbyshire Discretionary Fund, and that is a direct access pot of money, so any member of the public can access that. And there's two parts of that. Emergency cash payments to people who've sort of either fallen out of benefits or have got no physical access to any cash whatsoever, and fulfil the requirements within that to gain access to emergency cash payments. And then there's an exceptional pressures grant as well, which funds things like white goods, rent in advance in certain circumstances, etc., depending on a set criteria. And as an example, in terms of the emergency cash payments, there were 1,500 people in the Dales that applied for that money through the County Council last year, and that's the lowest number of any local authority. Not by some margin, but we do, in those indices of deprivation, it does appear to be quite right. I'd love a lot more money, and when we're given these allocations, I always go back and ask why those figures have been given, and I'll always advocate to try and get more money out of those pots for us. But similarly, we've made sure we've spent every single penny that we've been awarded over the previous 18 months. So the way in which we work it, as I said, we're not a direct access provision. We advertise the scheme through our partners, so Derbyshire Law Centre, CAB, Age UK, through the various housing associations, and we have an application process. And the first question we ask is, have these households accessed those other funds that may be available to them? So it's only where they've maybe approached through the Derbyshire Discretionary Fund, not been able to access that, we'll then pick up those pressures. So we're not giving people two bites of the cherry as is.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne.
These are the sorts of things that on the agenda where we're getting grants and we're able to help people that make me feel really good. Do you know what I mean? And it's really reassuring that we've got this money. and I'm very reassured that you have said about you're always going and badgering them for more, and I sincerely hope, and the question is, will you please badger them for more, and let's get some more funding, because it's these sorts of things that make the councils effective and just makes people's lives easier. And if there aren't any more questions, I'm more than happy to move, but I'll wait. Thank you.
Right, so Councillor Wayne's proposed the motion then, the recommendation, and Councillor Dobbs again seconded, I think, yes. So no further contributions then. Right. Oh, Councillor Bryan, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, first I want to pay tribute to the previous administration for the way in which they worked to support families in financial difficulties across the district. I think that does need to be recognised. I also think we should take on board the point made by Councillor Boothroyd that the government announced that this is the last tranche of funding, but have chosen to make no announcement on what might replace it. And I think that is a reflection on perhaps on the attitude of the current government, and it's heartening to hear that our officers are looking in collaboration with the whole council to see what measure we could put in place next year to replace this funding. Now, the funding sounds a lot of money, and of course we're very grateful for it, but we may be the least deprived council in Derbyshire, but I don't think that hides the fact that we have a large number of families who are currently suffering from quite severe financial distress. And this fund, I'm afraid, can only touch the tip of the iceberg. It is focused on those families most desperately in need, but there are a very, very large number of families who are in need, and I very much support what Councillor Wayne says, that we must continue to put the case to government that all local authorities, this one included, need significant funding from central government to address the very, very real difficulties that our families are facing at this current time. Thank you, Chair.
Contributions. We've got a proposer and a seconder, so can we move to a vote then, please? All in favour? It's unanimous yet again. Thank you very much. Right, item 10 on the agenda is to consider a report seeking approval to update and amend the District Council's housing renewal policy. So I can invite again Tim Braun, our Director of Regulatory Services, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is another of the functions undertaken by our environmental health team. There's another report about that team later on. It's also the second of 3 reports that mentions the Homes Upgrade Grant, or HUG, because that got a mention in the capital programme report and gets a mention in a report later on. On the face of it, this is quite a simple report to recommend that we use some money that we've got to help support a grant scheme to retrofit off-gas properties in our rural areas. However, I'm conscious that there's a fair bit of complexity behind this, and it's really quite unfair to expect even longer standing members to remember how this all works when it comes before you once every 3 years or so, let alone new members. So I'll just explain a little bit about it, if I may. Back in 2002, the government introduced a regulatory reform order to change the way, mainly intended to change the way in which local authorities administer something called the Disabled Facilities Grant, which was a funded grant scheme by government to provide adaptations to the homes of disabled people. The statutory regime in which that operated was introduced in the 1996 Housing Construction and Regeneration Act. I have to remember the titles of things that happened a long time now. The regulatory reform order introduced some flexibilities within the previous statutory system, but in order to use them, councils had to adopt a housing renewal policy, a policy which set out how they were going to use those pots of money. So ever since 2003, when that requirement came into force, this council has had a housing renewal policy, which mainly has concentrated on delivering mandatory disabled facilities grant. The reason for that is that the money we've had from government has usually only been enough to fund the mandatory grant system. To put that in context, we have around about £600,000 a year currently to fund that, and we deliver just under 100 grants from that amount of money. Because we've spent the money on mandatory grants largely, we haven't looked at doing anything great with the flexibilities that the regime enables us to do. Some of the other authorities in Derbyshire could get considerably more money, as we heard from Simon earlier. We get the least of any authority, no, we get the second least of any authority in Derbyshire on disabled facilities grants. However, some of the authorities who get a large amount of money are unable to spend it on mandatory grants, so they introduce a great deal more flexibility within their systems than we've been able to. Having said that, in recent years, the demand for disabled facilities grants, mandatory disabled facilities grants, has fallen, such that we've not been able to spend all the money that we've got. That's not that we're not processing the applications we get or we're not encouraging them, it's just that demand has fallen. Nobody's quite sure why that is. A lot of authorities did experience a downfall in demand over COVID, and it's likely, I would suggest, that it's due to that. Having said that, if you think about this regime being in place since 2003, there have been some reserves built up, and those have been added to significantly in the last 3 years, such that we've got £780,000 in reserves that we're now able to consider. 3 years ago, we introduced one flexibility, which was to help those people who had all disabled facilities grants are assessed, all the applicants are assessed in a kind of means-tested way to look at what contribution they should make towards the grant-aided schemes. And this council decided that it would waive any contribution where a household had an assessed test of resources contribution of £5,000 or less. The reason being, in reality, those people can't raise £5,000. It's based on a notional loan that you should be able to raise. And we had found that those people dropped out of the system and just didn't have the adaptation or didn't have an adequate adaptation. So this council chose to adopt that flexibility. What we've got now is a slightly different system where, situation I should say, where officers would like to support another grant fund, and that grant fund is a homes upgrade grant, which is considered in a report, I think the next report on this agenda, in more detail. In simple terms, that grant is government funded and it's intended to retrofit off-gas properties with effectively energy efficiency measures, the intention being to decarbonise those homes or to enable them to use more efficient forms of lower carbon heating. In the main, in our area, that means getting people off LPG and oil and onto air source heat pumps. It provides other measures as well, such as solar PV, energy efficiency, loft insulation, cavity wall insulation where cavities exist. But in the main, the purpose is to decarbonise those homes. What we've found over time is that there are some hard to treat properties that we've been unable to help. The reason for that is there is an average cost per household requirement within the government rules for HUG, Homes Upgrade Grant. If I call it HUG from now on, is that okay with everybody? You know what I mean? We have to have an average cost across the scheme of no more than £18,000. Some properties cost considerably more than that. Some of the properties we've been unable to help with are heritage assets, they're listed properties, and because additional works are required and planning permit or listed building consent is often required to do the works, there are additional costs just in those administrative moves. So we've learned from the experience of delivering HUG 1, the first round of HUG funding, and what we'd like to suggest for HUG 2 is that we try to support those householders. It seems inequitable that people are excluded from the scheme simply by virtue of living in a listed property or in a property that's hard to heat in other ways, and yet the householders are eligible in every other way. So we'd like to help those. And what we're suggesting we do is divert some of the money that we hold in reserve from disabled facilities grant funding to help with HUG. We're suggesting a budget of £70,000 over 2 years with a sort of indicative split of £30,000, £40,000, which is based on what we expect to be able to do. That's well affordable within the reserves that we hold and has the approval of the funder. We receive the money for disabled facilities grant from the county council as part of their Better Care Fund allocation, which they receive effectively. It's NHS social care money. And some of that money is diverted towards, or is directed towards, not diverted towards, it's directed towards disabled facilities grant. The county council are perfectly happy with us using it in this way. I can't claim that I've used any, or my colleagues have used any great deal of original thought, because we're basically copying an idea that Amber Valley Borough Council already operates successfully. So it is tried and tested elsewhere. I hope that explains the report to some degree. and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Tim. Is that summarising both reports and the next one as well? Or you got to add to that?
There's slightly more to say on the next report,
right.
but not as much.
Right, thank you. Right, any questions? Yes, Councillor G.
Do we have any idea how many properties fall into this category, like the listed properties, or in numerical terms?
We're currently dealing with 4 applications that we held over from HUG1 because we couldn't meet we couldn't deliver them. So we're dealing with 4 that we held over from the previous scheme. We'd expect to deal with maybe another 8 or 10 as part of this.
So is the amount of money you're putting aside going to be enough to deal with those properties that you anticipate coming forward?
It's our best estimate, Councillor G. We think so, yes. If we need more, we'll come back and ask for it.
Any further? Oh, Councillor Wayne.
Yeah, on a similar vein, actually, Councillor G. We've got the £782,136 that's been there. So that's going down to 712,000. I'm just thinking, can they vie between the 2 accounts? I mean, are we allowed to move more over than the £70,000? That's what I'm saying. Because if this isn't being used, it's important that it is used for the right reasons, isn't it? While still retaining a good reservoir of cash in that disabled facilities grant.
Thank you for that question, which is supportive. I appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Wayne. I should explain that in the background, colleagues in environmental health are carrying on conversations with our colleagues in occupational therapy at the County Council and adult care and children's services about other measures that we might want to adopt. The intention is by the end of the year to bring you something a bit more comprehensive about how we might want to use that money. I would suggest that if a budget of £70,000 is put aside now, that's more than enough to see us through the first year of the 2-year HUG programme, and we could bring that back at that time as well, Councillor Wayne.
Councillor Wayne. Any further questions? Another one? Oh, yeah.
No, I'm happy to move it.
All right,
That's where you were going.
Right, yes, right. So it's been moved. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Archer, thank you. Right. I want to move on to debate then. I don't know if anyone's got any contributions to make further than the questions that have been asked. No? We'll move to a vote in that case then. Proposed in the seconder. So all in favour? Unanimous again. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm Mike, yes. Tim Braun will present this report as well. Jo Hill would have been here, but I'm afraid she's on holiday, but she's our climate change officer, so she would have been a useful contributor to this debate, no doubt. So anyway, Tim Braun is going to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members about a large capital scheme for which we received complete funding from government and supports Karen's report on the capital programme to recommend that we accept the funding that we've been offered and put it in the capital programme effectively. I should explain, HUG, Homes Upgrade Grant, is a wholly funded government scheme, apart from the bit we've just agreed to put in from disabled facilities grants, and is intended to retrofit off-gas properties. We had originally intended to adopt an area-based approach to delivering that, and we found that didn't work. We have, however, a very cooperative contractor, properly tendered contractor, who is happy to deliver this across the district and not able to take advantage of some of the economies of scale that would work, that he would get from an area-based approach, but is happy to absorb that. We've been offered a very significant amount of funding, just under £1.9 million over a 2-year period to extend this programme. We have already delivered HUG 1, which the bit I will say in praise of Jo, just so as you get an idea of how she works. Any underspend on any of these schemes we have to give back to government. The underspend we've incurred on HUG 1 is £13. So she spent all the rest of it, and we feel that's been very effective across the district. We have a good reputation with our colleagues at the Midlands Net Zero Hub. We're part of a consortium that they administer that gets us money. I met with them earlier in the week again in lieu of Jo being here. They are very pleased to work with us, mainly because they are working with her and she's very efficient and gets things done. So they're very pleased with us, and we have a good record of delivery, which is why we've had such a large offer. Plus, of course, we're a rural area with lots of off-gas properties. It's a really good opportunity to help our residents and deliver a scheme that benefits them, helps people get out of fuel poverty or not fall into it in the first place, but it also benefits the government's climate change ambitions, in the sense that we're delivering something out there in the community which helps reduce the carbon footprint of the district.
Thank you. Any further questions? Can we move to debate then? Okay, Sam. Any contributions, Councillor Bryan?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Again, of course, we want to welcome this funding, but I think there are the 2 points I'd like to make in welcoming it. First, I think it's already been acknowledged that the cost of energy efficiency measures in many of our properties is extremely high because of the nature of their construction. And these grants are, as we know, they're limited to low-income families. And there is a statutory definition which the government uses as to what low income means. But due to the high costs involved in achieving these energy efficiency measures, what happens in practice is that even middle income families find it really difficult to afford these sorts of measures. So, the second point I want to make is that this scheme is again limited to off-gas. Now, that is welcome, but we have very, very many properties in need of insulation measures which are on gas. And it's extremely disappointing that the government continues not to come forward with any sort of assistance which can provide financial assistance to lower and middle income families in properties which suffer from a very poor insulation, even though they're on mains gas. So I hope that we will continue over the coming months to lobby government for a change in policy approach. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor G.
Yeah, I keep being told not to politicise things in this meeting, but this recommendation is to accept the offer of £1.897 million. That's the limit of it. It isn't to make political announcements about what government gives and doesn't. It's just about us accepting this, and I'm in favour of it.
Councillor Dobbs.
I'd just like to add thanks to Joe for this very good news, and of course we would like it to be able to apply more widely. I take Councillor O'Brien's point that it would be nice to offer it to families in need who happen to have gas central heating at the moment, but anyway, it is a welcome report. I thank Jo for it and what she has managed to do, and yes, to just have £13 left is quite impressive.
Councillor Chapman.
Can I make a recommendation that the £13 underspend is used for Tim and Joe to have a drink on us?
Yes, that's a good one, yeah. All in favour? I think that's unanimous again. Thank you. Right, go to the final item on the agenda, actually, which is item 12. To consider a report outlining the official interventions for food hygiene and health and safety at work undertaken by the Council's environmental health team. Can I then call on Amanda Goodwill to, I think it's going to be that rather than Tim this time, to present that report. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a change of voice and a change of theme away from housing, which is, I think, welcome from the other items. So just to give you a bit of background information to this particular report, under the Food Law Code of Practice, there's a duty to deliver official food safety controls, which sit with the local authority. Prescribed within that duty is the requirement for a service plan. The plan should encompass national priorities which are dictated by the Food Standards Agency, which report into central government. It should be brought before members to be approved, and once approved, should become a public-facing document. The Environmental Health Team Service Plan, it's a bit of a mouthful for the title of the plan, is in Appendix 1 to the report, and that is our plan proposal. The plan adopts a standard format, and it's a useful tool for reflecting on the previous year's activity, but also the challenges that lie ahead, and in terms of emerging trends and issues which do cut across to other colleagues in other service areas. Also, from a management perspective, I think it's a really good mechanism to showcase some of the other work that environmental health do from a statutory perspective outside of air quality, housing, disabled facilities grants. In terms of key points, it contains a lot of information, and I hope you found it a really useful read. It's a good insight into the challenges that hospitality sector is facing coming out of COVID and the recovery aspect of that, and businesses generally. And as a service, I want to thank the efforts of officers in this respect. We continue to deliver on the government targets and milestones coming out of COVID. If you weren't aware, environmental health were one of the front-facing services to actually deal with COVID and some of the constraints around that. And the commercial sector, a lot of those elements were closed, so there was a really big backlog to get on top of coming out of the COVID recovery. And as a small team, we have delivered on those milestones which were dictated by the Food Standards Agency. We continue to get involved in the discussion around how food regulation may change as habits have changed, how food is consumed, where you can buy it. From the FSA's perspective, that there is dialogue around how that will change over time. We've also chosen to enhance the service with our online registration, and from a rural perspective we thought it was really important as a service to be involved in the schools project under the Levelling Up Fund, and we were the only Derbyshire authority to participate in that scheme, which we thought was incredibly important. It's important to stress that we provide free help and advice to all commercial premises. We understand the strains that they're after, that they're under and continue to be under. And also in terms of the enforcement perspective, and there is an element of that within the report in terms of matters that we've had to take formal action on, that is, for members' perspective, is based on risk and necessary at that point in time. So the conclusion is, the recommendation is to approve the draft plan so that we can move that forwards. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions to Councillor Dobbs?
Thank you. It's an impressive report, and thank you for this. It's just simply at the top of page 109. Is that a typo, or am I misunderstanding what it's supposed to say? Do you mean experiencing? Page 109, demands of the service. The service is currently establishing a lower level of compliance. Do you mean experiencing a lower level of compliance, or am I kind of missing the...
Sorry, my page numbers are different in terms of whereabouts.
Okay, it's page 5 of 18 in the
okay.
in your new document, new service plan.
Experiencing.
Yes,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Sorry,
Yes.
apologies. Yes, we will change that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. And again, you know, the environmental health team do a marvellous job when they're going out to all these fast food outlets and pubs and things like that to make sure that our residents and visitors are kept safe. Sometimes when, you know, not full faculties in the evening, if you know what I mean. So I'd just like to say that I note on that the number of very good food hygiene ratings has decreased to 642 in April 23 from 753 in April 22. Could this correlate with the implementation of your new database? And are you confident that the district council is accessible to, I don't know whether, it said you got a new database that came in January, and basically I was just wondering whether that might correlate with the dip, the accessibility for people to get advice, because that's also manifested itself in one of the charts as well?
I think just generally we've seen the challenges are boding out in terms of performance within premises, in terms of availability of staff, time, the trading hours of those particular businesses, the ability to pay for certain aspects, and that has caused a change. That is a trend that is across the whole of Derbyshire and practitioners generally in terms of that dip in performance. But in terms of the quality or the rating of businesses across the Derbyshire Dales, there's only about 3% where they are, scoring at 2 stars or below. If you think about the food hygiene rating scheme, which is 1 to 5, we have a very high percentage that are good in terms of that and very good. So it is, to keep it in perspective in terms of the enforcement aspect, it's only a very small number of premises around a number of issues within those premises.
I wasn't being critical of that.
No, 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 that's
what I was
fine.
merely trying to say is that I was just wondering whether the dip and there's actually a drop off in the actual reporting, for people accessing information seems to have dropped off as well, and whether that was due entirely to the new service, the new actual computer system database that you got in January. That was all.
No.
You're happy with that? That's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Boothroyd.
I have one question, which is maybe a bit off, but about the scope of the environmental health. So since the pandemic, I think there's been an increase in the amount of fast food offered out of the fast, or maybe to take away. It's not necessarily fast food, but it's to take away in single use or disposable things. Do we account for that increase in environmental health once it's left the premises? So there's essentially a massive increase in the amount of food contaminated items that are now entering our litter bins and streets and things. Is that accounted for in anything in terms of environmental health?
In terms of the scope of the business, we always review that in terms of what their offer is. A lot of the food offers have changed over time in terms of takeaway or particularly the types of food that they provide. If there are issues around refuse or containment of waste, that is something that there's a duty on the particular business to have some provision within the curtilage of their premises. But if there is a trend of complaints that come in around, thrown away wrappers or whatever within close proximity, we will pick that up with the business, but we'll also cut across with Clean and Green colleagues if there are particular hotspots around that.
No. Can we move to a vote? Oh, we'll move to debate, I suppose, if anyone's got any contributions. Any further contributions? Oh, Councillor Hobson.
Just a quick one, Chair, because I know you're keen to get a short meeting. Thank you, Amanda, for an excellent report. I think sort of food hygiene and safety for all of us, as our councillors here and our residents and visitors, it's very important to everybody. And I was really impressed with your talk of support for businesses, and I'm thinking particularly those small businesses coming post-COVID. Yes, we do have to enforce, but to support them and that there is free advice available, I think it's excellent. Thank you.
That's it for contributions, and so can we? It's been proposed and seconded. So can we move to a vote, please? All in favour? Okay. That's unanimous again. Thank you.
Only at the right temperature.
Before I close the meeting, can I thank all the officers for their attendance, including those who already left the meeting tonight. Not least, in fact, Paul Wilson, our Chief Executive, who's sat very quietly throughout this meeting. We must thank him for his interest in this committee and other committees. He does attend quite regularly, as I've found over the last 8 years while I've been on the council. So, but I also like to apologise for not introducing our award-winning and excellent Democratic Services team leader, Tommy Shaw, at the back there, who's been doing 2 jobs in 1 tonight. Very impressive indeed.
Don't worry, Chair, I'm still recording.
Sorry?
So don't worry, Chair, I'm still recording. So that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right.